Hi, it's Katrina. Today's video is non-stop controversy, with some discoveries that are hard to believe but impossible to ignore. Some might wish that these things just stay hidden, but now it's too late, and like a train wreck, you just can't look away. One man's search for the Black Pyramid. On a slightly less terrifying note, how would you like to hear about aliens, a Black Pyramid, and one man's fateful mission to the outer reaches of Alaska? Good, because the search for the Black Pyramid was enough for one man to risk his life, like many explorers before him, on a quest searching for something that may not even be real. On May 27, 2020, so not that long ago, Nathan Campbell hired a plane to take him from Talkeetna to a small lake in Alaska's Denali National Park. He was equipped with a bit of camping gear and had a large cache of food with him. He also had a two-way satellite communicator so that he could speak with his wife and kids while he was on his journey. Nathan was in the park for the next 4 months. Why was he there? To find the Black Pyramid. According to the myth, the Black Pyramid is 4 times larger than the Pyramid of Cheops in Egypt. It's also millions of years old, meaning it was made by a civilization that existed long before human beings ever evolved. Conspiracy theorists say that the structure is powerful and that the military is well aware of it. In fact, the US military has been purposely keeping the ancient pyramid a secret. They ensure it's wiped from all satellite images while making sure that nobody ever accidentally stumbles upon it deep in the Alaskan wilderness. Most people don't have the funds or the time to hire a plane to take them far beyond the edge of civilization. And even if they do, they aren't out looking for controversial pyramids. Nathan was an oddball that way. He put everything on the line to confirm the pyramid is out there somewhere. And when I tell you what happened to him, you're going to be speechless. But where did the myth of the pyramid even come from? In 1992, scientists were studying shock waves from underground nuclear tests that were conducted by China. During the investigation, scientists supposedly identified what looked like a pyramid-shaped void of interference 700 feet underneath the surface of Alaska. The conspiracy theory picked up speed when an anonymous retired naval captain agreed to appear on Coast to Coast, a conspiracy theory radio program. He said that during the 1980s, he had worked on secret radar installations across Alaska. During his work, he was always curious about a mysterious power source in the middle of nowhere. It would disrupt his communications, and it was as if a giant battery was in the middle of the icy wilderness, though he never saw it with his own eyes. In the middle of June 2020, Nathan's texts stopped. All communication with his wife was terminated. It's unclear what happened between June and September, but Nathan wasn't there when the plane went to pick him up on September 15th. The National Park Service sent a team to find him, but Nathan was gone. They couldn't find him anywhere. The search team found some moldy clothes, his food storage containers, and his tent, but Nathan himself was never found. It's been almost 4 years, and Nathan is a ghost. Alaska is a very dangerous and wild place, so anything could have happened to him. He could have fallen and injured himself and died, or been eaten by an animal. He could have gotten lost. The possibilities are endless. But there are those who wonder, could he have been abducted? Did he find an entrance to the underground pyramid only to never return? Did he even believe in the Black Pyramid? There are a lot of questions, but what happened to Nathan will probably remain a mystery. Atlantis discovered in Morocco? A computer expert apparently discovered the remains of Atlantis hiding in plain sight. Atlantis has been right under our noses this whole time, and we never saw it. Forget about the explorers who traveled across the seas and scoured the islands and scrutinized historical records. It was computer expert Michael Hubner who finally cracked the case wide open. At least that's what Michael said. Michael's take on Atlantis was pretty unique and surprisingly clever when you think about it. Michael said that Atlantis was hit by a devastating tsunami that destroyed it, but unlike the legends that say Atlantis stayed submerged, the water receded, leaving the ruined city a little soggy but still on dry land. It's a novel idea, right? Michael said that it's exactly why people missed the ruins for so long. Atlantis has always been on dry land, not 6 leagues deep. Michael reached his conclusion by studying Plato's Timaeus and Critias, finding 51 clues about the ancient city. But these clues weren't exactly new. People have known for thousands of years that Atlantis was near the sea, that it was a vast city surrounded by concentric rings, and that it was 3,100 miles from Athens. Plato also said that Atlantis had great mountains. What Michael did was something nobody was able to do until the modern age. He took Plato's clues and put them into a computer program. The computer program then pinpointed all possible locations within 3,100 miles of Athens where Atlantis could have been. Michael ended up settling on the most logical spot, the South Massa Plain, which is situated 100 miles south of Marrakesh in Morocco. Michael's work was sound and makes a lot of sense. The desert basin of South Massa is about 7 miles from the sea. There happens to be a large mound here, sort of like the raised platform at the heart of an ancient city. All around the mound are what look like circular dry riverbeds. From a visual perspective, the desert basin does look like Plato's description of Atlantis. It's plausible that a city did stand here once and that it was overwhelmed by a huge wave. The whole area is prone to earthquakes, which are known for flattening cities and summoning apocalyptic tsunamis. This dry, desolate landscape could have, 12,000 years ago, been the shining glory of Atlantis. Sadly, though, Michael Hubner passed away in 2013. However, his controversial theory lives on as one of the most respected explanations for the mystery of Atlantis. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And now for number 10, but first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Patrick Polite for the super thanks! We wouldn't be here without your support, so thank you so much! If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family! Did the Greeks build the Terracotta Warriors? New research has suggested something that should be impossible. It turns out that the Greeks may have helped build the legendary Terracotta Army in China. But according to mainstream history, the Greeks never went to China. At least, not when the Terracotta Warriors were made. This is the merging of two worlds, so you're going to learn a lot in the next couple of minutes. Up until now, it was always believed that Marco Polo, the man who somehow got immortalized as a weird game you play in the pool, was one of the earliest Europeans to reach China. His journey took place in the 13th century, with Marco Polo carrying letters from Pope Gregory X to Kublai Khan of the Mongol Empire. But what if the first contact was made 1,500 years earlier? According to a report from the BBC, the shocking new theory is based on evidence found during excavations at the tomb of China's very first emperor. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the man who unified China under a single ruler for the first time. He lived in the 3rd century BC and founded the Qin dynasty. He began the Great Wall of China and was buried in a vast tomb upon his death in 210 BC. A fun fact is that Qin Shi Huang likely died because of his quest for immortality. He had his alchemists brew him mercury, which he drank, thinking it would give him eternal life. But instead, it probably poisoned and killed him. His tomb is absolutely incredible. It's really something that you'd expect to find in a fantasy TV show, not in real life. Chinese historian Sima Qian wrote that it took 700,000 men to construct the mausoleum. That would mean it took over 7 times the number of men needed to build the Great Pyramid of Giza. Just think about all that work! The mausoleum was lost until 1974, when farmers stumbled upon the life-size terracotta statues of warriors, chariots, and archers. There are more than 8,000 warriors, built to protect the emperor from evil spirits that might try to terrorize him in the afterlife. He was also buried with 40,000 real bronze weapons. You know, just in case. Could the lifeless warriors have been made with help from the Greeks? Li Xiuzhen seems to think so. Li is the lead archaeologist at Qin Shi Huang's Mausoleum Site Museum, so he knows what he's talking about. Li said that evidence has been found showing contact between China's first emperor and the Greeks prior to the Silk Road. Chinese researchers said that it looks as if the terracotta figures were inspired by Greek sculptures. This could mean that Greek artisans traveled to China in the 3rd century BC and taught Chinese laborers how to build the terracotta sentinels. It's a little vague, I'll admit, but you also have to admit that it might make sense. Before the construction of the Terracotta Army, there were no life-sized human statues in China. It just wasn't something they did. So it's possible that an outside influence inspired them. For example, the Greeks spread their culture to Asia during Alexander the Great's conquest a century earlier. Greek sculptors and settlers might have strayed from Alexander's army and settled in parts of China, bringing along their homeland's culture. It's definitely possible, but what do you think? The worst archaeologist ever. Even in death, renowned phony archaeologist James Millard tried to pass off hoaxes as reality. The famous but incredibly controversial scientist passed away in 2012. After his death, a colleague discovered drafts of writing materials, unfinished carvings, and unfinished murals in his apartment. So, what was the big deal? All of these materials were things that James had been working on and would have passed off as real artifacts had he lived, when really he just made them in his own apartment. James's career wasn't always about fakes and forgeries. He was a lecturer at Istanbul University and the University of London. He was always making unbelievable claims, but he didn't hit the public eye until what's known as the Dorak affair. According to James, he had encountered a young woman on a train from Istanbul to Izmir who wore an unusual armband. She informed James that the armband came from a collection of antiquities that her family owned. She agreed to show him the treasure, which he identified as being artifacts from the Yortan culture. James claimed that they were a neighboring city-state to Troy 2,500 years ago. When asked for pictures of the relics, James said no way. It was against family policy to photograph the pieces. And as for where the artifacts came from, James said they were excavated from shallow graves near Dorak during the Greco-Turkish War. What happened next was outrageous and belongs in a Netflix special. James fabricated a letter sent to him by the woman on the train, giving him permission to publish his findings on her family's treasure. James then published sketches and notes which drew the investigation of the Turkish authorities. Turkish authorities thought that James had smuggled the treasure out of Turkey, which was why he only had sketches and notes. However, it's much more likely that he fabricated the whole thing and that the treasure never existed at all. This was only the start of James's infamy. One time he claimed that he found a series of beautiful murals at the 9,000-year-old ruin of Çatalhöyük. But before he could take a photograph, the murals crumbled to dust like a vampire that was staked in the heart. Seems pretty suspicious if you ask me. It was more likely that he was painting the murals himself and he hadn't finished them yet. Traces of ancient Egypt in Mexico. A piece of ancient Egypt has been discovered on the other side of the globe in Mexico. At Calixtlahuaca, archaeologists identified a brick altar that was built in the shape of an Egyptian ankh. But how did it get there? The most obvious solution seems to be that the Egyptians made contact with Mesoamerica. The ankh is one of the oldest and most important symbols in the world. The ancient Egyptians used it to represent the key of life. It was a hieroglyphic character that literally translated to the word life. You can see examples of the ankh today etched in tombs and temples across Egypt. Around the 3rd century AD, Christian converts in Egypt changed the old symbol into a Christian symbol. They removed the loop part at the top to form a simple T-shaped cross. The Christian cross is an altered ankh. Don't tell that to anyone at your church, though. So, what is it doing in Mexico? Truthfully, Mexico isn't the only place where this ancient symbol shows up. It's been found in Minoan sites, on the island of Cyprus, and in ruins across Asia Minor. Some cultures use it to identify the planet Venus, and some alchemists use it to identify the metal copper. Calixtlahuaca, or at least the ground it's built upon, has one of the richest histories of any ancient city in Mexico. 200 years ago, Spanish historians were already trying to piece together its origin. Ancient nomads likely settled in the region around 640 BC. They were the descendants of an even older group of hunter-gatherers known as the Otomi, who congregated near a lake that is currently dried and empty. Then the Matlazinca showed up and built a small settlement. They fell under the influence of the Toltec culture and were subsequently conquered by the Mexicas, who were in turn conquered by the Aztec in 1476. I told you, it's a long history. I just condensed 3,000 years of culture into just a few sentences. The Aztec were the ones who destroyed the previous city and built a new one upon its bones, which they called Calixtlahuaca. This new city became the capital of minor Aztec kings who controlled the Toluca Valley. But things didn't go great for very long. The Matlazinca I mentioned earlier, the ones who built the first small settlement, weren't entirely gone. The Matlazinca are indigenous to the Toluca Valley, and they wanted the Aztec out of their ancestral lands. In 1510, they tried and failed to kick them out, resulting in King Moctezuma II ordering Calixtlahuaca to be destroyed. These days, the city is in ruins. One of the ruins is the brick altar I mentioned at the beginning, built exactly like an Egyptian ankh. So, did the Aztec copy the Egyptians or dream this thing up all on their own? What's even more mysterious is that the Calixtlahuaca head was discovered here. It's a small terracotta head that was found in 1933, and it appears to be Roman in origin. The head looks exactly like the head of a Roman person, and nothing like anything else that's ever been found in Mexico. The head and the ankh were found in the same city. Surely that's not a coincidence. Romeo Christov from the University of New Mexico assessed the case in 2001. He argued that a ship, possibly Roman or Phoenician, maybe even Arabian, reached Mexico in the 6th century BC. And this could explain the weirdness of Calixtlahuaca. What do you think? Is this possible? Let me know in the comments below. How humans really came across the Atlantic. Mainstream archaeology might be lying to you about something. Have you ever heard of the Solutrean hypothesis? It suggests that the first humans to arrive in the Americas came by boat. It's a theory that could be a reality, yet it's so controversial that very few scientists are even talking about it. Let me break down the theory piece by piece, starting with what the accepted science is. The current explanation that they teach in classrooms is that humans walked across the Bering Strait when it was frozen somewhere around 15,500 years ago. Talk about a hike! The exact date for when this happened is changing all the time, so don't put much stock in it. Discoveries have been found placing humans in North America at least 23,000 years ago, possibly even 30,000 years ago. Humans embarked on the biggest pilgrimage, arrived in North America, and then slowly kept walking until they ran out of land. This took thousands of years, but eventually people of all different shades and cultures were spread across the Americas from the Inuit to the Inca. But this might be completely wrong. The Solutrean hypothesis claims that instead of strapping on their hiking boots and crossing over from the north and walking down south, early settlers to North America used primitive boats and traveled along pack ice, sheets of floating ice. They were able to reach North America, probably somewhere in the north, and follow the coastline to a warmer climate. From an unbiased standpoint, it could go either way. There is evidence of both, with each hypothesis sounding extremely convincing. And you know what? Maybe it was both. Maybe some people did walk and others came by boat. To me, it wouldn't be that shocking, but to some, it's extremely controversial. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments, because I'd love to know. The mummified fetus of an alien. A creepy mummy with an elongated skull has been discovered in Colombia. It's either a dead alien or a tiny humanoid that lived in a cave in the jungle. Whatever the answer is, it's pretty creepy. The mysterious fetal mummy has slanted eyes, 10 ribs instead of 12 on each side of its body, and a skull oblong enough to be mistaken for a football. Photos of the skeleton were sent to reporter Josep Guijarro. Supposedly, the remains were found in a cave on a remote mountain called the Hill of the Dwarves. There is no sign of an umbilical cord, strongly suggesting that it's not human. It looks incredibly similar to 2 different alleged aliens, both of which you've likely heard of before. The Colombian mummy looks like the baby version of the alien mummies that were presented to Mexico's Congress last September in 2023. It also looks like the Atacama mummy found in Chile, which scientists say is a mummified fetus, not an alien. But some are skeptical. They say the specimen is probably a stillborn baby that's been mummified by some freak accident. Others believe the remains are from a race of tiny humanoids that once lived across South America. UFO hunter Ramon Navia Osorio Villar said this small race of beings lived in jungle caves. They were known by the Aymara tribe, who said the beings lived in peace before the arrival of the Spanish. The Aymara have known about the tiny humanoids for the last 8 centuries. They supposedly lived in Colombia, Argentina, Peru, and Bolivia. So, what do you think? Could this be an entirely different race of humans? Or, if what the UFO hunters and conspiracy theorists are saying is true, it means that creatures the size of fairies really existed. Although, I guess if they had to live somewhere, it makes sense that they were in the Amazon jungle. The secrets of the cursed tablet. Let's discuss something controversial now that doesn't involve somebody going missing or being murdered. But don't worry, more scary stuff is coming later. In 2019, a team of archaeologists found a folded lead tablet. The tablet is about 3,200 years old, covered in what might be the oldest known Hebrew writing ever found in the Holy Land. The tablet was discovered while sifting through a pile of ancient debris near Nablus. The controversy is what the Hebrew writing suggests. A team of archaeologists, led by Dr. Scott Stripling of the Bible Seminary in Texas, claim the tablet proves that the Israelites could read and write as they entered the Holy Land. Therefore, the Israelites could have been writing the Bible as the events were taking place in real time. If they were documenting their journey as they went, it means that the Bible is a historical account rather than a work of fiction. Dr. Stripling also says that the tablet has the earliest writing of Yahweh on it, which is the divine name of God in Hebrew. The assumption is world-changing. If a scientist is ever able to confirm that the Bible is a real book of events that happened, that would be enormous. It would mean that monsters are real. It would mean that God destroyed entire cities with balls of fire. And it would also mean that we all have a very nasty apocalypse to look forward to. The tablet was found on Mount Ebal. Mount Ebal is a place of curses and evil in Deuteronomy. And sure enough, the tablet appears to be inscribed with a curse. It was even found near the ruins of an ancient altar at the exact location where, in Deuteronomy, Joshua built an altar of unhewn stones. It's all very coincidental. But scientists like Professor Christopher Ralston are not convinced. Christopher, an expert in ancient Semitic languages from George Washington University, was dubious from the second he heard about the discovery, mostly because Dr. Stripling's team didn't peer review their study. They made a bunch of assumptions and then announced what they felt to be true without other scientists checking their work. Ralston said facts are facts, but Stripling's article didn't deliver on the facts. Instead, it delivers long spiels and heaps of speculation. At the end of the day, it boils down to scientists not agreeing. Does this cursed tablet prove that the Bible was written by literate Israelites over 3 millennia ago? Maybe or maybe not. Without a peer-reviewed study confirming what's even said on the tablet, it's all just hearsay. What's hiding in the Azores? 1,000 miles from the coast of Europe, just before hitting the 1/3 mark to America, you can find the stunning Azor Islands. They belong to Portugal as of right now, but belonged to nobody at all until the 15th century. There was no official record of any human living on these islands prior to their discovery by the Portuguese. However, a new controversial theory could change everything. Experts think there could be ancient ruins on the Azores Islands that nobody has ever found before. I'm talking about real experts here, including the president of the Portuguese Association of Archaeological Research, Dr. Nuno Ribeiro. Nuno said rock art, man-made structures, and other remnants prove a civilization dominated the islands thousands of years before the Portuguese found it. He's been saying it since 2010, with mainstream archaeologists largely ignoring him. It was such a contentious subject in Portugal that the government had to establish a commission to investigate. And what do you suppose that commission found? In 2013, the official commission from the Portuguese government declared that there are no ancient remnants on the Azores Islands. any perceived remnants of an ancient culture are nothing more than natural rock formations mistaken for artificial structures. But scientists aren't convinced. It isn't just Nuno Ribeiro. Antonieta Costa at the University of Puerto also said the Azores were inhabited during the Stone Age. These scientists agree that there was an advanced culture that sailed across the ocean and populated the islands. You're probably thinking the same thing I thought when I first heard about this. Why don't archaeologists just do excavations at some key sites to see what they find? If there is proof of civilization, it can't be debated. If an excavation reveals tools, a house, a temple, or a pyramid, the debate is over. It's not that simple, though. The Portuguese government has denied all requests for archaeological investigation. Nobody is allowed to dig for clues, making things more suspicious than they need to be. Assuming experts like Nuno and Antonieta are correct, and the ancient humans did live on the islands, what does that mean? One suggestion is that there was a trading route from Europe to North America 2,000 years ago. It's an idea that's been floating around since 1778. That was when Johann Podolin from the Royal Society of Sciences claimed that he found Carthaginian coins in the Azores Islands. Carthage was the capital of Phoenicia in North Africa starting around the 9th century BC. They prospered as the biggest merchant empire of their day. It's possible that the Phoenicians established settlements in the Azores to trade with ancient cultures as far away as North America. You can think of the Azores as a sort of stepping stone or a stopover on the journey to America. Alien statues in Antarctica? What does this look like to you? A face, right? It looks like a huge grimacing face buried in the snow, its mouth agape and its nose just barely visible. This picture was taken from Google Earth, showing what might just be evidence of a lost civilization buried beneath the snow in Antarctica. Only the face can be seen, suggesting there could be an entire body attached to the face and buried dozens of feet under the snow, ice, and rock. There could even be more alien faces carved in the stone nearby. But until global warming kicks it up a notch, you and I won't be able to see them on Google Earth. The other alien statues will remain buried under thousands of years of accumulated snow. But what are the experts saying? They are calling it a bonkers conspiracy theory. The experts say the alien face is nothing but the result of pareidolia, which is what it's called when your brain sees shapes and patterns where they don't exist. When you look at a cloud and see a bear wrestling an orangutan, that's pareidolia. Still, it's hard to imagine this is just an optical illusion. Conspiracy theorist Blake and Brett Cousins said the alien face appears to be a massive structure, perhaps part of an even bigger megastructure left behind by a powerful civilization in Antarctica. And if there's one, there are undoubtedly many. It could be that one day soon, scientists find Antarctica to be covered with statues, like Easter Island. The most controversial stones in the world. The Ica stones prove that humans lived alongside dinosaurs. These stones are among the most mysterious artifacts in the world. But are they legitimate? The controversial stones were uncovered in Peru. They were found to be etched in strange petroglyphs of creatures that are obviously dinosaurs. More than that, the stones are covered in petroglyphs of men watching the sky with binoculars. They show the use of electromagnetic energy, and there are even images of pyramids on them. As a whole, the collection is impossible to explain. Actually, I'll let you be the judge of what's impossible. The stones initially were found by farmers in Peru in 1961. They didn't make global headlines until 1966, when one of the Ica stones made it into the hands of Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquea. He was given one as a birthday gift. I want one for my birthday. When Dr. Cabrera investigated further, he was shocked. There are thousands of Ica stones, and no two are identical. Some are big and others are small. They all have a weird picture carved into them that makes a mockery of what humans know about time. There are even images of dinosaurs hanging out with people. But how does that make any sense? In 2013, Spanish scientists at the Autonomous University of Madrid carbon dated the stones to between 60,000 and 100,000 years old. They clearly weren't made during the age of dinosaurs, about 66 million years too late for that. But then, how are there images on the stones of primitive jawless fish that haven't been around for 200 million years? Why are there images carved on the stones of people performing a blood transfusion, or another of an organ transplant? Most experts say it's a hoax. They believe a small army of local craftsmen made fake Ica stones as a way to earn some cash. But there may also be some real Ica stones mixed in with the fake ones, from which the locals originally got their inspiration. The debate over their authenticity has been raging for the past 60 years. The Lost White Tribe. One of the most controversial scientists in human history was Johann Blumenbach, a German anatomist from the 18th century. He had a personal collection of 250 skulls, from which he claimed to have discovered 5 distinct varieties of humans. It was Johann's bizarre scientific beliefs that kicked off an epidemic of global racism. This was the guy who came up with the word Caucasian. In 1795, Blumenbach announced his theories. He believed that the different races had similar levels of intelligence and character. It was their physical perfection that he was concerned with. That perfection centered on the skull of a nameless Georgian woman that was discovered in the Caucasus. The skull was taken from the woman's grave with little information about how or why. He probably stole it. Blumenbach was so obsessed with the skull that he made it the center of what he started to call the Caucasian race, which became the epitome of whiteness. He said that it was the most perfect skull in his whole collection. Believe it or not, I haven't even started with the weird stuff. And yes, there are going to be some Nazis coming up. Blumenbach believed that Caucasians were the original type of human, but that they degenerated into other racial forms after migrating from their ancestral home. Keep in mind that this has been disproven, but in the 1700s, people believed just about anything scientists told them. His theory was that an ancient race of white tribesmen lived in the Caucasus Mountains, and then started migrating to places like Africa, India, Persia, and Asia. When humans encountered new climates, they started to change. Their skin changed, their traditions changed, and their language changed. Blumenbach even used the Bible to back up his claims. The Bible says that when the Great Flood ended, Noah's Ark came to rest on Mount Ararat in Central Asia. The first post-flood city in the world was built in Turkey, and from there, humans started populating other regions of the world. This meshed with his theory, and because it was biblical, people were more likely to believe it. Soon, these original white tribes had been given a name. People called them the Aryans. Cue the ominous music. Scientists across Europe started repeating Blumenbach's theories, all based on nothing but the Bible and his weird collection of human heads. It became known as the Hamitic hypothesis in Africa, named after Noah's son Ham. In Europe, it was called the Nordic race theory. In the early 1900s, the rising Nazi Party of Germany clung to this theory. While not directly responsible, Blumenbach's false and downright dangerous ideas helped inspire the ideology of those behind the Holocaust. It doesn't get much more controversial than that. And sadly, there's still more to cover. The disturbing ideology didn't end with the Nazis. It's still around today, especially in Africa. In 1994, Rwandan genocide was the result of a bizarre belief that the Tutsi were of Caucasian ancestry and the Hutus were the degenerative race, which gave the Tutsi racial superiority. Between 1965 and 1979, the apartheid government of Rhodesia tried to say that white settlers in Africa thousands of years ago built the site of Great Zimbabwe, and archaeologists who debated them were exiled from the country. Sometimes the most controversial discoveries can turn into seriously dangerous ideologies that change the world. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Number 10. Bosnia's ancient pyramids. The most mysterious pyramids in the world are not in Egypt, they aren't in ancient Greece, and they can't be found anywhere in Mesoamerica. The strangest and most controversial pyramids on the planet are in the Balkans, in the small European country of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Amateur archaeologist Sam Osmanagic believes these great pyramids are so big, people have been mistaking them for mountains for centuries. He calls one of them the Pyramid of the Moon, and the one standing next to it is the Pyramid of the Sun, rising an unbelievable 720 feet into the clouds. There is also supposedly a third pyramid nearby in the hills, and Sam says all of them are 12,000 years old. Unfortunately, Sam is most likely wrong, because most of Europe was under about 1 mile of ice 12,000 years ago. At this point, humanity hadn't even begun to grow crops, never mind build megalithic structures. The dating just doesn't make sense. However, that hasn't stopped Europeans from going crazy over these alleged pyramids. Since the claims began circulating in 2005, there have been over 400,000 people who have visited the sites, and yet nobody has confirmed the pyramid-shaped hills to be artificial structures. As far as most scientists are concerned, they are just mountains, but if they are ever proved to be 12,000-year-old pyramids, it will change human history forever. Number 9. Early opium. At a burial site in Israel dating back to the Bronze Age, archaeologists have found something unexpected. They came across the earliest evidence of somebody using opium in the ancient world. Researchers found residue of opium, which is an extremely powerful narcotic, inside pottery vessels over 3,500 years old. The jars were scattered around the burial site in central Israel at Tel Yehud. This region was once known as Canaan and was the famous home of the Canaanites from the Bible. It was archaeologists with the Israel Antiquities Authority who first discovered the mysterious burial site in 2012. But it wasn't until recently that they identified traces of opium inside the pottery. They tested 22 storage jars and found that 8 of them contained obvious amounts of the highly addictive substance. What's even more interesting is that the pottery vessels were not all made in Israel. Some of them were imported from the island of Cyprus, suggesting some kind of prehistoric opium trading network. Researchers are now guessing that early Neolithic communities learned of the natural properties of opium and used it to their advantage. Since the plant did grow naturally across the Mediterranean, it would have been an easy thing to farm and cultivate. What nobody's entirely sure about is just how heavily addicted ancient people may have been to opium. We know the ancient Egyptians only allowed their best warriors and their priests to use opium. We also know it was used by the Sumerians to reach higher states of spirituality. However, in ancient Israel, it looks like the Canaanites may have been using it recreationally and in very unhealthy amounts. Number 8. Chapultepec artifacts. Archaeologists in Mexico have come across a collection of artifacts in a rather unexpected place in Mexico City. These artifacts were hiding just underneath the surface of Chapultepec Forest in Mexico City. This is one of the oldest urban forests anywhere in Latin America, with archaeological sites inside of it dating back to 1200 BC. The forest has been an important place in Mexico's history for over 3,000 years. These days, the forest is managed by the National Institute of Anthropology and History. It's also a popular park just outside the bustling streets of Mexico City's historic district, a place where hundreds of thousands of people walk every single day. The recently discovered artifacts were being trampled by people daily as they walked through the park, and nobody had a clue. Archaeologists decided to dig about 3 feet under the surface. They immediately found burned clay vessels, curious human figurines, and even charred artifacts that appeared to have been burned in strange rituals. It turns out, this forest was the home of a pre-classical village during the height of the Teotihuacan civilization, between 225 and 550 AD. Sadly though, archaeologists can't just dig up the whole park, and people will most likely continue to walk over everything without realizing. Number 7. Crystal-stuffed dino eggs. A pair of dinosaur eggs were recently discovered by paleontologists in China. The dinosaur eggs are each about the size of a cannonball and are filled with strange, shining crystals. This whole discovery turned out to be extremely strange. It's not that unusual to find dinosaur eggs, but they aren't normally filled with crystals. Also, paleontologists don't know what dinosaur species laid the eggs. They believe the eggs belong to a previously unknown dinosaur, one they don't currently have a name or description for. The dinosaur eggs were found in the Anhui province of East China and were dug up from the bare soil. Researchers say the eggs are nearly spheroid, like oblong cannonballs, and their inner surface is covered in calcite crystals. Calcite is a mineral typically found in bird eggs and dinosaur eggs. The crystals likely formed when the calcium carbonate separated from the structure of the eggshell and was deposited on the inside surface. Then, over millions of years, it grew into calcite crystals. It's something that can happen, but it's incredibly rare to find with dinosaur eggs. Number 6. Fossils in the mountains. As unbelievable as it may sound, fossils from one of the first reefs in the world were found on top of mountains in Nevada, specifically the mountains of Esmeralda County. High above the deserts of southwestern Nevada, not far from the border of California's Death Valley, traces of a tropical reef have been discovered. This reef was alive 520 million years ago, right after a period known as the Cambrian explosion. This was a time when the Earth exploded with rich biodiversity of complex life. At that time, Nevada was completely covered by water, and the mountains of Esmeralda County were on the sea floor. Organisms that lived and died in the prehistoric ocean were buried in the sediment, along with dead corals. Millions of years later, these fossilized corals and animals rose to the peaks of the mountains to be found by paleontologists. A paleontologist from Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, Emmy Smith, recently visited these mountains to find more fossils. Smith said that even though she was walking around on mountains, it also felt like she was scuba diving. She and her team came across the fossilized remains of filter-feeding sponges called archaeologist. And of course, they also found plenty of traces of extinct life from one of the first coral reefs to ever thrive in the ocean. What other amazing archaeological discoveries do you think could be hiding on mountaintops? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 5. Treasure in the Bahamas. On January 4th, 1656, a navigational error caused the Nuestra Señora de las Maravillas to sink. The ship was a massive Spanish galleon that was on a voyage to Spain from the Americas. The ship had just loaded itself to the brim with treasure stolen from the native people, disguised as royal tax and private property. These riches were taken from the conquered tribes of the New World so that the King of Spain could grow even richer. However, the ship never made it to Spain. It sank, and all the treasure went down with it. The site of the wreckage was relocated almost immediately after the ship sank, but nobody could find any of its treasure. In the following centuries, many people tried desperately to get rich by scavenging the shipwreck. It wasn't until 1972 that explorer Robert Marks salvaged some small pieces of the wreckage. Then, even more remains were salvaged between 1986 and the early 1990s by Herbert Humphreys. But it was just recently that a team of underwater treasure hunters finally brought up the good stuff. A team with Allen Exploration, created with help from the government of the Bahamas, discovered a small trove of treasure. Down at the bottom of the ocean, off the coast of the Bahamas, hiding under layers of silt, they found solid silver bars, gold chains, emerald pendants, and other amazing relics. This was no easy discovery because the treasure was scattered along about an 8-mile stretch of the ocean floor. People have been searching for the treasure in the wreckage, when in reality it had already been pushed by the ocean currents for miles in all directions. The treasure will now be put on display at the Bahamas Maritime Museum. Number 4. The Harak Face. The face of Harak is one of the most mysterious things that's ever been found in the Amazon rainforest. It's located in an extremely remote part of the Peruvian Amazon, first photographed and spread online in 2014. But since then, nobody has studied the face, and we still don't know much about it. All we know is that a large rock in the middle of the jungle appears to have been carved to look like a face, and it most likely happened a long time ago. There's just no way to confirm if the face was carved by human hands or if it's a freaky accident of nature. For the indigenous Harak people, the face has always existed. Stories have been passed down from generation to generation of the stone face, and so it's become a silent god to the natives who live in the jungle. The Harak also say there are 2 other sculpted stone faces, but they are so deep in the forest, nobody has ever found them. Mysteriously, even though the locals have heard tales of the face of Harak for generations, Nobody can say exactly where it came from. Not even the Harak know who crafted the face or what its purpose was, but they do have some guesses. Because the face is carved into the side of a cliff overlooking a long stretch of river, it may have been made to represent a guardian spirit of the jungle. Number 3. The Coral City of Leu. The Coral City of Leu can be found somewhere that you wouldn't expect to find an ancient ruin. It's on Leu Island in the Federated States of Micronesia, a small island paradise in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The island looks like any other random tropical island, and it's covered in tall trees, rich in biodiversity, and has beautiful, pristine beaches. But it was also occupied by a small group of people around the year 1250 AD, and they thrived up until the 19th century, when European missionaries and whalers showed up. There were only around 1,500 people living on the island, but they built a very unique city with its own hierarchy. The city itself was divided into sections based on class, and there was the mighty king in the very center of the city. Then the wealthy aristocracy surrounded the king with houses made of strong basalt rock. To the west, the lower aristocracy lived in less impressive houses made of coral. Spreading out from these rich areas was the bulk of the population, island peasants living in rudimentary thatch huts. But here's what makes the city of Leu so mysterious. Nobody knows exactly who built it. The people are long gone, and all we have are unreliable reports from early European visitors. 200 years ago, these visitors claimed the mysterious Coral City was built by Spanish castaways, pirates, and some even claimed it was the Japanese. Number 2. Coins in the kitchen. A couple made a mysterious and unexpected discovery under the floorboards of their own kitchen. The UK couple were undergoing renovations at their home when they stumbled upon an incredible stash of ancient treasure. The couple, who don't want to be named for privacy reasons, found a cup that was no larger than your average soda can. However, this cup was filled to the brim with 260 coins, all of them dating from between 1610 and 1727. According to the Spink & Son auction house where the coins will be sold, their total worth is nearly $400,000. The discovery of the coins is now considered one of the largest of its kind in British history from the 18th century. But the real mystery is just how random the discovery was. They were tearing up their floorboards and chiseling away at the concrete underneath when they thought they hit an electric cable. But it turned out to be an old cup filled with life-changing wealth. The coins were minted during the reigns of King James I, King Charles I, and King George I. Local experts say the coins most likely belong to an influential mercantile family named the Fernley Maesters. They made their wealth trading iron ore, timber, and coal before they turned to lawmaking in the 1700s. They likely buried the coins underneath their house, but then later died. The house was purchased and sold multiple times through the centuries, and nobody bothered to dig up the floorboards. Number 1. Mammoth Tooth. It was the middle of September 2022 when Art Castillo took a walk along the Cotton Belt Trail in Waco, Texas. According to what Art told local news, he walks this trail about 3 times a week. As he was hiking, he looked down and saw something that seemed a little unusual. It almost looked like a rock, yet it had strange lines and patterns on it. It was also covered in mysterious layers that made it seem important. Art picked up the curious object and took it with him. It turned out that he had stumbled upon a mammoth tooth while strolling through the Texas Trail. He took the artifact to the Waco Mammoth National Monument and learned that he had a fossilized molar from a Columbian mammoth in his possession. The mammoth tooth is between 25,000 and 50,000 years old and was once in the mouth of one of the greatest creatures that ever walked across North America. In the end, Art Castillo didn't even keep the tooth. He donated it to the local museum so that kids and other visitors could enjoy it in the years to come. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye!